Hi everybody, it's Lori again. I can't say welcome back to my kitchen today because I'm not in the kitchen. I'm actually outside on the porch and we are just enjoying the finally warm weather. We have been busy picking violets and dandelions, and I made some violet jelly yesterday, and now we're on to the dandelions today. And dandelions have amazing health benefits, and I'm not going to go into too much of that because it would just take way too long. But look into dandelions. The entire plant is edible. The petals of the dandelions, the yellow fluffy petals, can be used for dandelion jelly and for dandelion honey, and you can dry these for tea. The greens of the plants in early spring, the young tender greens of the plants are edible, and you can steam them and cook them almost like you would spinach or kale, and you can eat them hot with a little bit of butter and lemon, and they're just delicious. They are packed full of nutrition and really good for you. I've heard that it clears out your kidneys. I know that my grandmother always used to send all of the kids, my mom and all of her siblings, out in the early spring to pick dandelion greens because it was just necessary that they all had at least that one meal of dandelion greens to clean out their bodies and their blood. So look into the benefits of dandelions. They're amazing plants, and again, the whole thing is edible. The root is also edible. You can look into that. You can use that to make what they call dandelion coffee. It is a little bit bitter, and that's why they say it kind of tastes like coffee, because it's a little on the bitter side. But I'm not going to explain how to do all of those things today. Look into that on your own and see if this is something that you want to add to your homes and your pantries. Just for, it's free, totally free. You go out and pick them. It doesn't cost you anything, and there's a lot of health benefits to it. But along with dandelion jelly and honey, I also make wine. I'm not going to get into how to do that. Winemaking is pretty extensive, and so I will just say go ahead, and if you're interested in making wine, do a little research on that and find out how to do that. I recommend it highly. It's a wonderful stuff. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you how I remove the petals from the dandelions. I see a lot of people kind of struggle with how to remove these petals, and there's a lot of different ways of doing it. But when you are collecting your dandelions, you only want the yellow petals when you're making wine or jelly or honey with them. You just want the yellow part of the flower, and that can be really difficult to do. I've harvested these for many years, and I've come up with a way that's easy for me to do, and it's kind of time saving. And it just assures that you have absolutely no green bits in with your yellow petals. And so I'll show you how I do that today, just because I know a lot of people kind of struggle with removing all of these little yellow petals. So what I do is I take my thumbs and I just kind of split the base of the flower. I open it like a book. So there's two halves, but it's not completely apart. It just opens up like what you would do with a book. And then you can see that all of these petals are exposed inside, and you can just take your thumb and rub them off into a container. All right? They just pull right off and into the container. I'll do another one here. So you take the flower and you just take your thumbnails and split that open like you're opening a book. And you see how neat all of those petals are in there? So you hold it together with your thumb, and you take your other thumb and you just pull those petals. Just kind of like you're brushing them off. And see how nice and neat they just pull out of there? I'll do one more. And yes, your fingernails and your fingers are going to get pretty yucky. Dandelions, surprisingly, are sticky things. So after a while of working with them, your fingers do get stained. So we're open like a book, and then we're just going to take our thumb and just brush them off. And you can kind of hear that it makes a little ripping noise too. But look at how nice and clean that is. And I am not getting any of that yucky green base of my flower in there. And so all of my petals are just going to be clean yellow petals with absolutely no green in it. So that's how easy it is. So hopefully that will help some of you on harvesting your dandelions a little bit easier. We're going to sit here. My husband's going to help me get some of these dandelions together, or dandelions cleaned, and then I'm going to go on to make at least one batch of dandelion jelly, and I'll walk you along with me on that so that I can show you some of the tips on what I've learned about dandelion jelly in the last quite a few years. That's another thing that people...
Question.
Yes, dear.
Why take the green off?
You remove the green of the dandelion because it is very bitter. And also when you're making wine or dandelion honey or dandelion jelly, it will make it miscolored, and you want that nice yellow color. So you just only want the yellow parts of the dandelion for making those items. So anyway, now that we had a question from the back that we got answered, we're going to sit down and clean all of these dandelions, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how I make dandelion jelly. So we'll talk to you in just a few more minutes. All right, guys, so we're back. It took us about an hour. My husband Roger filled up a jar. I filled up a jar. So we have approximately 8 cups of just dandelion petals here. A couple of things that I do want to touch base on is, first of all, we harvest our flowers on our own property. And so we, number one, do not spray anything anywhere. We use no chemicals on our lawn or in our gardens. So we know that it's free of chemicals. And we also know where all of our animals go potty. Our ducks are contained, our chickens are contained, and we know our dog's favorite places to go potty. And so we avoid those areas. So when you are out picking dandelions or wild violets, just make sure that you're doing it in a safe and clean place to do it. You know, keep in mind that, the dog park probably isn't a good place to be picking dandelions. And think about chemicals also. Another thing I do want to share is that after you pick your dandelions, you really do need to harvest the petals pretty soon after you pick them. Within an hour, you can see the dandelions start wilting and closing up. And they just react that way when they're picked. They just close their little heads back up, and then it's very, very difficult to get the petals out of those flowers. So you can see that they're all kind of in different stages of reclosing. But so after you pick those dandelions, make sure that you get those petals harvested pretty soon after you've done your picking. So what I suggest doing is picking your dandelions in smaller amounts, and then sit down and harvest those petals, and then go out and pick another bunch and harvest those petals. It's just a lot easier because, as you can see, they do close up very, very quickly. Now, another thing, I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but if you pick enough petals that you don't necessarily have enough time to make your jelly or whatever you're wanting to do, you can freeze these flower petals. They freeze absolutely beautiful. What are you doing, little miss? Hey. What? This is our little Sadie. She's always got to be at the table when Mom's at the table. Don't you? Yes, you do. Anyway, you can freeze your petals. So what I do is I just take a Ziploc bag, and obviously I've just labeled it, and I've labeled how many cups of petals I'm going to be freezing too, so that I know for my future recipe use how many cups of petals I have in this bag. And so I'm just going to freeze 4 cups of petals today because I don't need all these petals today. So I'm going to keep some of these for wine making. So for today, I'm just going to freeze these 4 cups of petals. So I just put them in there, and then you're just going to want to squish out all your air, okay? Just get them nice and squished and make sure there's no air in there. and zip it shut. And these can stay in the freezer. I've kept them for up to 6 months with no problems at all. And if you vac seal them, I'm sure that they would stay even longer than that. But I know I'm going to be making this into something here soon, and so I'm not going to worry about vac sealing it. So for my dandelion jelly recipe, I technically only need 2 cups of petals. So I've got enough petals for actually 2 batches of jelly. So I'm going to make 2 recipes of jelly. And your first step is to take your 2 cups of petals. I'm going to get these 4 separated into 2. So I have 2 cups in each quart jar. And you take 2 cups of petals and 4 cups of boiling water. And you pour your 4 cups of boiling water over your petals, and then you allow them to steep for 24 hours. So I've got good hot boiling water. I only have 4 cups. I'll have to boil up another one for this other jar. But just very carefully and slowly. Now you don't want to cause thermal shock to your jar. So just slowly pour that water in over the petals, giving your jar enough time to adjust to the temperature of the water. All right, there we go. And we're not going to get quite all 4 cups in, but that is good enough. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to take and just stick a temporary lid and ring on this, and after it cools down a little bit, then I will stick it into the refrigerator overnight, and I'm just going to allow this to steep for 24 hours. Now tomorrow when I come back, after these have sat in the water overnight and a little bit longer than that, then we will strain it, and we're just going to use the water, the tea that we've created with our petals in order to make the jelly. So for now, I'm just going to allow this to cool for a little bit outside of the refrigerator, and when it cools down, then I'll stick it in the refrigerator for 24 hours, and we will have our nice dandelion tea. So we will come back in a few hours. All right, so we're back. It has been over 24 hours. I left my dandelion petals in the boiling water. I left it out for about an hour and a half, maybe a couple hours last night before then putting it in the refrigerator. You know, I allowed it to cool off a little bit. Then I stuck them in the refrigerator and just forgot them until now, until I'm ready to make my gel. So this is what they look like after they have steeped for 24 hours. And you can see that they're not floating as much as they were last night. I did once in a while, I kind of tipped the jar and kind of, you know, just mixed them around a little bit. You don't have to shake it. In fact, you probably don't want to shake it because you might really disintegrate all those petals. And then you really have a mess straining it all out. But, so they have soaked for 24 hours. Now, at this point in time, you can strain them, and if you don't feel like making your gel, you can go ahead and freeze this dandelion tea. After you get the petals out of there, you can freeze this. Or you can just simply put your strained tea back into the refrigerator, and it should be good for up to 3 days before it kind of starts going a little bit funky. So if you don't feel like you can make your jelly, or if you have other things going on and you need a day or 2 buffer, that's fine. Strain it after 24 hours and then just keep that strained tea either in the refrigerator for up to 3 days, or you could freeze it for, you know, maybe a winter project if you wanted to. So that's just a little tip. So I'm going to show you how I strain the petals from the tea. So I'm going to get the camera aimed down here. Oops, sorry, I'm knocking you around, guys. You can see that I have my big jelly making pot. This, well, it's not really a jelly making pot, but it's a nice big one, and I use it a lot for doing this. So because it doesn't boil up and over the pan. So make sure that you have a fairly large pan so that you don't have boil over issues. And then all I'm going to do is take my dandelions, and of course they heat sealed because I put that on while it was really nice and hot, so it actually created a vacuum. That does not mean that they would be shelf stable. Don't even ask that question. The answer is no. That doesn't make them shelf stable.
So there you have that. But anyway, in my pot, I have a wire mesh strainer, and then I have cheesecloth. So all I'm going to do is drain my dandelion petals into that pot. You can go ahead and give it a squish. You're going to want 3.5 to 4 cups fluid, okay, when you're done. Now, I know that I have 4 cups because I filled my quart jar like completely full. So I know that I have enough. But if you needed to, you could strain that into a measuring cup, you know, like a 4-cup measuring cup, and make sure that you have enough fluid. Now, another thing I'm going to do today is a lot of people have problems with jellies setting. And the reason why that is most often is because they're following directions, whether it be directions on a recipe or whether it be the Sure-Jell directions. And sadly, most of the time, boiling that after you've added your pectin and you bring your jelly to a boil, and then you add your sugar, and they say bring that to a boil and boil for, you know, depending on the directions, it's 1 or 2 minutes after you've put the sugar in. You boil it for 1 or 2 minutes. Most times, I'll be frank with you, most times that is not long enough. You need to boil your jelly a lot longer than what the directions are telling you. And I swear, if you do this, you will not have any problems with your gelling. The key to making jelly is 220 degrees. So what you're going to want to do is, I didn't know where I said it. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get yourself a candy thermometer, okay? And all you do is after, you've put your pectin in and you bring that to a boil, and then you put your sugar in and you bring it back to a boil. You keep boiling whatever kind of jelly you're making, whether it's dandelion or violet or apple scrap jelly or whatever kind of jelly you're making that you always have problems with getting it to gel or to set up. I swear, go to 220 degrees on a candy thermometer and it will set. I promise you it will set. Now, particularly with floral jellies, a lot of times we do have problems. I've got a gnat bothering me. A lot of times with floral jellies, we do have problems getting them to set because flower petals have no pectin in them at all. Now, when you're doing a fruit jelly, fruit has pectin. All fruit has a certain amount of pectin in it. And so you are actually, when you have your fruit in there, you have a certain amount of pectin already. And then you go ahead and you add your liquid pectin or your box of Sure-Jell pectin or powdered pectin, whatever you put in there. You got a whole bunch of pectin going on. With floral jellies, you have no pectin except for what you add in your pectin powder. So it is extremely important, particularly with floral jellies, that you boil this stuff a lot longer than most of the directions you guys are seeing. And like I said, I just promise you, if you remember that 220 degree rule, you're not going to have any problems. And sadly, it takes sometimes up to 10 minutes of boiling this jelly to reach that 220 degree temperature. So you're going to be standing over this hot stove, boiling this stuff for at least 10 minutes. But I guarantee you it will gel. Okay, another thing is that a lot of people just swear that you can only make a single recipe of jelly at one time. If you do a double batch, you're not going to be able to get it to gel. Well, that again, I will say, you use that 220 degree rule and you can double your batch. If you have a big enough container, you can triple your batch. As long as you boil it until it reaches 220 degrees, you're going to be fine. So, just to prove my point today, now, my dandelion jelly, a single recipe, I'll go over that just one more time. 2 cups of dandelion petals, just the yellow parts only, 4 cups of boiling water. You allow that to steep for 24 hours. Then you strain it like what I just did. And now with that fluid, I'm going to add a single box of Sure Gel, okay, the whole box of Sure Gel, and I'm going to boil that. And once it reaches a boil, I'm going to add 4 cups of sugar. And then I'm going to boil until I reach that 220-degree mark, okay? But like I said, most people claim that you cannot double jelly recipes. I do it all the time. It works just fine. You just need to remember that 220-degree rule. So I'm going to go ahead. I had enough prepared for 2 batches of dandelion jelly. I'm going to go ahead and strain the second one, and I'm going to make a double batch just so you guys can see that yes, indeed, it will work by doubling the batch. So I'll get these drained. And again, I know for sure that I have, in between 3.5 and 4 cups of fluid by the end. I know that I have that much because remember, I filled it really, really full with boiling water. I filled my jar all the way up, and a quart is 4 cups. So I'm confident that I have the proper measurement. I don't feel like I had to measure that in a measuring cup. And we'll just give that a squish. Okay, so I guess I should get you back down here where you can see what I'm doing, huh? So I have strained both of my my steeped batches of dandelion petals, and I squished it just to get the remaining water out. Okay, so I got that pretty dry, and I'm just left with this wad of used petals. Now, I don't necessarily have any tips on what to do with these. They're pretty much spent, so they're just going to be thrown into the chicken pen. The chickens will eat them. They'll think it's great. All right, so I have enough dandelion tea in my pan for 2 batches of jelly. So 2 recipes of dandelion jelly. Get those out of the way. So now what I'm going to do, if I was only making a single batch, of course I'd only put 1 Sure Gel packet in. And I do have the regular Sure Gel because I am doing a regular recipe today. I'm not doing the reduced sugar recipe. There are recipes out there for reduced sugar, and then you need to have the reduced sugar type Sure Gel. But I'm using the regular Sure Gel today. So I'm just going to add both my packets since I'm doing a double recipe. Get my garbage out of the way. And then I'm just going to take a whisk and whisk that Sure Gel, get it to dissolve. Okay? I'm going to turn on my burner. And I'm going to go around medium heat. And I'm just going to keep stirring this. Over medium heat until this mixture comes to a good boil. When it comes to a good boil, then I'll come back and I'll show you how I add my sugar. There's nothing really special about it, but we'll just take it step by step so that those who have never made jelly before, and particularly dandelion jelly, know each step and what to do. So I'm over medium heat. I'm going to keep stirring this and bring it to a good boil, and then I'll be back in a minute. Alright guys, so we're back. Now I've got my dandelion tea and my Sure Gel in here, and I have brought my pot to a boil. So this is the point where I'm going to add my sugar. Now remember, for a single recipe you would only add 4 cups. I have a double recipe, so I am adding 8 cups of sugar. And I don't just dump it all in there at once. I kind of do it slow. so that I don't have this gigantic lump of sugar just right square in the middle of the pan. I'm going to switch hands. So I just whisk as I pour. Okay, all of our sugar is in there. Now this is where it gets interesting. So you just stand here and you stir constantly. Bring this back to a boil. Now it doesn't have to be a furious boil. Jelly is like molten lava when it's hot. And so if it's boiling so much that it's spitting up at you and you're getting burnt, you're boiling it too hard. Bring it down to a little bit lower of a boil, a controlled boil. Okay, it doesn't have to be this volcano going off in your pot. Just a good steady, gentle boil is fine. And you just stir this and just continually stir it until you test it with that candy thermometer and you have reached 220 degrees. And I can tell you generally it takes almost a 10-minute boil. So talk about, this is about the closest I ever get to going to the spa. Is standing over this steaming hot stove for this long and I get all this stuff in my face. This is my spa day. In the meantime, while I'm bringing this to a boil, as you can see, I've got my canner next to me. Now, generally, dandelion jelly, the instructions are that after you've made your jelly and you put it in your jars, you can water bath it for 10 minutes or steam can it for 10 minutes. I don't do that personally. I open kettle this. Jellies can be open kettled. They have a lot of sugar in them. They're very safe. So I'm going to open kettle my jelly today. And I've also noticed that floral jellies, you might get them to gel and then you go on to water bath them or steam can them, and sometimes for some reason that set just breaks and I don't know what happens with that. So I just prefer, especially with my floral jellies, I prefer to open kettle can it. And how you open kettle can is, you can see that I've got all my equipment in hot water. I've got boiling hot water and vinegar. I've got all of my jars in there sanitizing. I've got my lids in there getting nice and hot in the water. And I also have my rings getting hot in the canner. So all of my equipment is right here in the canner getting hot while I'm making this jelly, so that my stuff is good and sanitized and ready to go when I have boiled my jelly to the point where I want to put it in the jars. So this, like I said, will take approximately 10 minutes. So I'm not going to have you just sit there and watch me literally boil something on the stove. So I will be back when it's ready to put in the jars. Alright guys, so there is lemon in this recipe, and I totally forgot to add the lemon when I added the pectin. But I did remember after I added the sugar and I was in my boiling stage. And so I added the lemon at that point in time. And the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of lemon juice per recipe. So I put in 4 tablespoons because I'm doing the double recipe. Now I have been keeping track of my time. It has taken 17 minutes for me to boil this to the point that I am now at 220 on my candy thermometer. So now that I've reached 220, I am ready to go ahead and put this into jars. Now I did not add any butter. Sometimes you can add a little tablespoon of butter and it will kind of keep the foaming of your jelly down a little bit. I did not do that this time, which doesn't concern me at all, because if I do have foam left, I'm just going to skim it off. And I'll show you how I do that. Let me grab a spoon. Okay, so I just take like a tablespoon, and if I have any of this foam on the top, I literally just skim it off with a tablespoon. Okay? And you can kind of work it over to one side of your pan. It just floats on the surface. Pretty easy to remove. And skim all that foam off. So this, when you hear people talking about skimming the foam off your jelly, this is literally what it is. You're literally just taking off that foam layer that happens from boiling hard. And of course, the more foam you remove, the prettier your jars of jelly are going to be. That foam doesn't hurt anything, okay? So if it doesn't bother you and you're not giving these as gifts or whatever, and it's just your family, and there was me keeping track of my time. If you're not giving them as gifts and your family doesn't mind or whatever, don't worry about skimming it off. It doesn't really hurt anything. It just kind of makes your jars of gel look a little less professional if you have that foam on top of your jelly. But it will not hurt anything at all. Okay, so I have skimmed off as much foam as I feel like I want to. And so now we'll get to the canning process, okay? And like I said before, I'm doing open kettle with these jars of Dandelion Jelly. And so the process for open kettle canning is that you need good, hot, sanitized jars. And so I have my jars and everything, like I said, over in my canner. So I'm just going to take a hot, sanitized jar, and then fill it up to 1/4 of an inch headspace. Now that jar is nice and hot because I had it in boiling water. And you can fill it all the way up to that 1/4 inch. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take and wipe the rim of the jar just to make sure we don't have any jelly drips on it. We're going to take a hot lid out of our boiling water. Ouch. And yeah, that is hot. Be careful. A hot ring. And just screw it on tight and set it aside. Maybe you can't see what I'm doing there, can ya? All right, we'll do this again. So I've got my hot jar from the canner, and then I'm going to fill with my hot jelly to within 1/4 inch headspace. With jelly, you really don't have to debubble. There's not anything really to debubble. So you don't have to run, run one of those debubbler sticks or whatever around in it. It's liquid. There's no bubbles in there. All right, wipe your rim. Grab your boiling hot lid and put that on. Grab a boiling hot ring and put that on, and try not to burn yourself on all this hot stuff. Screw it tight and then allow it to cool. Okay, we'll do one more. Again, open kettle canning. Hot sanitized jar, hot jelly, to within 1/4 inch headspace. Wipe the rim. Place hot sanitized lid. Hot sanitized ring. And set it aside to cool, and it will seal as it cools. Okay guys, I've got to work quickly to get the rest of my jars done here, and I'll come back when I'm finished and talk to you for a few more minutes. Alright guys, we're back. Now I've got all of my gel canned up in my jars, but what I want to show you is a good indicator to know that you are going to have a good set on your gel is, if you can see on the bottom, do you see on the bottom of my funnel those little danglies? That is jelly that has cooled off and set up. So I know I'm going to have a good gel. Now another way to indicate or know that I have a good gel going on is that foam that I took off, look at how solid it is. That's another really good indicator that I have cooked my jelly long enough, because that foam has totally gelled up. Another way of telling is that when your cooking pot is empty and things start cooling off in your pan, you can see, let's see if I can get it up without making a mess. You can see, like, even my ladle, you can see my ladle has gelled up jelly on it. So I have cooked my jelly well enough that it is gelling immediately. There is no waiting 2, 3, 4 days and praying that it's going to gel. It is literally gelling up as it cools off. So I can go ahead and even scrape my pan here. This is the pan that I cooked the jelly in. And look at, as I scrape the remainders out of the pan, look at that. Beautiful, beautiful jelly. Now that's of course a little foamy because I'm scraping around and everything, but what I mean is the set. It is setting up absolutely gorgeous. I am not going to have any problems with my jelly not being set. 220 degrees. I'm telling you, it is the magic number. You will not have a failure if you do your jelly this way. With a candy thermometer, bring it up to 220 degrees on that boil with the sugar in there. So the second boil, and you won't have any troubles at all with your jelly setting. So let's see where I put my, aha, here we go. Now that we're all finished up here, I will show you how absolutely beautiful this jelly is. Look at how gorgeous that is. It almost looks like melted butter, doesn't it? Just beautiful, clear jelly. Now, dandelion jelly is pretty amazing stuff. It actually tastes very, very similar to honey. So my family really enjoys having this on toast with peanut butter. So you have peanut butter in your dandelion jelly, and it's just wonderful stuff. It, you know, goes on bagels and whatever else you want to put it on too. Excuse me. Dandelion honey is sometimes called poor man's honey. Don't know if you all knew that little fact either. But dandelion honey is really good for like over the top of ice cream and drizzled over the top of cake. There's just a whole bunch of things that you can do with dandelions. We love dandelions here at our house, as you can see. Oh, and another thing I forgot to mention. Now remember, excuse me, that I did a double recipe of jelly. Oh my goodness, I did 2 batches instead of 1, and it gelled. So yeah, you don't always have to do a single batch. As long as you cook that jelly long enough and get to that 220 degree point, it's going to set and be beautiful. Alright, so I hope that some of that was some helpful tips for all of you, and I hope that you have the opportunity to go out this spring and maybe find some dandelions and make yourself some dandelion jelly. It's amazing, yummy, delicious stuff. We enjoy it here, and I think you'll enjoy it in your home too. Until I see you guys again, happy canning, everybody.